The mental side of trading can be brutal. It can take you on some of the highest highs imaginable or drag you down to some of the deepest lows that you'll ever experience. It reveals and exposes things about yourself that you didn't even know were there and challenges you in so many different ways. It's like a roller coaster ride. Now on YouTube, I've seen popping up lots of these videos that say something like, how I beat the mental game of trading after 4 years of failing or 5 years of failing. And let's be honest, most of those people probably have never actually beaten the mental game of trading, but even if they have, those amounts of time might sound significant, but they're really not in the grand scheme of things. So I first started learning about the markets back in 2002. That's over 20 years ago. And in 2012, I gave up my career in banking to become a full-time trader and start trading for a living. So that's coming up to 13 years ago. And I can tell you, after all of this time, 4 to 5 years is barely scratching the surface. There are so many things that you'll experience, that will be revealed to you, exposed, and that you'll go through that will show you that you knew very little at that point. Different market cycles, when you have more capital and you're making bigger profits, bigger losses, maybe managing money on behalf of other people, different phases of life, different things that will impact your trading from the outside. There are so many lessons to be learned. In fact, I've even spoken about it in a video on this channel that one of my worst moments psychologically from trading was when I'd already been trading for a decade. I'd made hundreds of thousands of pounds in profit. I was trading full time. I'd managed capital on behalf of other people. And that's when it hit me the absolute hardest. And I had a meltdown. I got really ill from it. And at that time, I thought I knew everything there was to know about the mental side of trading. And in hindsight, and that was probably about 10 years or so ago now, I realized I didn't know as much as I thought. So because I think those videos most likely don't cover the right things, or they're not actually talking from experience, they're just wanting to put together a video because they've seen that that topic's doing well, I thought that I would put together a video going through 15 principles or actions that I know for a fact will actually improve your trading psychology. Now, I know everyone's different, everyone's mindset is different, everything that people have been through is going to be different, different experiences, different view on the world, different obstacles and problems and so on and so on. So it's not like trading psychology can be a one-size-fits-all approach. But I guarantee to you, if you follow these 15 principles or actions, you'll be 90% of the way there. This will sort out most trading psychology problems you could go through. Most people, if you follow this, you won't have any problems anymore. This is based on my experience. As I said, I've been trading for over 20 years now. It's based on helping hundreds, maybe even thousands, depending on how you classify it, traders around the world to overcome these problems and to improve their trading. And it's based on extensive research. I use evidence-based information. We actually dig into the studies and find out what works from neuroscience and psychology, not just this received wisdom, unfounded opinions that you see everywhere else, this wishy-washy pseudoscience. This stuff is evidence-based. However, and I'm going to share my screen now, when we go through these points, you're going to see that this isn't scripted, so I can't cite the research for you because I don't remember all of it off the top of my head. I remember the essence of it, but not exactly who it was by or the year it was published. So what I'll do is, in the description box, you'll find links to different videos that we've done covering these specific topics, or I'll mention that there's a video coming up soon. And of course, if it's not scripted, those of you that have watched our videos before will know that it's likely to be quite a long video. I'm going to be sometimes going on tangents and telling stories or rambling, and some people love that approach because they like the nuance, the discussion, and some people hate it. So with that in mind, if you're the type of Karen who rushes down to the comment section to write things like, you're taking too long to get to the point, you're talking a lot but not saying enough, then stop being so entitled. This is a free video, it's free information. You're not being forced to watch it. You can just save your time and effort and go somewhere else. You're not going to be able to speak to my manager. The buck stops with me and I don't care. So hit the dislike button and just fuck off. No one needs to see the comment. But anyway, with that out of the way, let's get to the first point, which is to ground yourself with realistic expectations. I'm going to apologize straight away. My handwriting is terrible, but I want to draw all over this as we go along. So there are two things that are the absolute worst for people that are learning to trade. It's two things. We've got urgency and scarcity, and these are going to come up a lot. Now there's another thing which is down here, and we'll say it's patience. Now everyone talks about, with patience, it's about waiting for the right entry, being patient enough not to force things and to overtrade and that kind of thing. I would call that micro patience. We'll talk about this as we go along, as with these other 2 points as well. But there's also macro patience, which is all about your development. And it all relates to this feeling of urgency. Now, social media has made it really difficult for people to have realistic expectations because there are two things that you see on social media. It's huge returns, I'm going to do a huge percentage here, and short timelines. So what happens? I've seen this one in our community loads. You get people who are sensible people who understand that trading is not about making hundreds of percent returns every month, but still have distorted views on what realistic returns are. Even if they think they're being realistic, they still have distorted views on it because social media has distorted everyone's opinion on trading so much. You see, when I first started learning about trading, I was reading books. Yeah, I'm kind of ancient. You couldn't go online and watch a YouTube video back then. It was like there were bulletin boards that were really shit and they were for like small cap equities most of the time. But instead it was books, and people didn't really talk about insane returns. It was more about the process. And so I developed curiosity for the markets, which then developed into a passion for the markets. And I'm going to put that over here. And we're going to also refer to this. So curiosity, which then develops into passion. But these days, someone can progress with their trading, develop the skill and be amazing with their trading. I've seen it all the time with our members, and then be making like 1% to 5% a month. Because here's the thing, we've talked about this in the video before. Let's say that this is your trading and this line here is break even. And all the time that you're learning, you're kind of losing down here. It's not like when you become consistently profitable that you jump from here to like 100% return up here, that it comes up here. Oh, I'm consistently profitable now, so I'm now making like mega bucks. No, it's like this. There's break even, you're learning, losing, you start losing a bit less, you stay around break even for a while, and then you start like drifting a little bit higher and a little bit higher, you hit plateaus and so on. You might be at like 1% return per month on average for a very long time. And guess what? That's amazing because that's better than 95% of the market. You know these stats where it's like 95% of traders lose, and maybe it's 90% in some cases or 80%, whatever stat you want to believe in. But I like to think it's 95%. That doesn't say 95% of traders are, 5% of traders are making profit. That's saying 95% are losing, which means that from the remaining 5% is also counting people who are not losing and not making a profit, i.e. balances at the brokers that have not been touched when people deposit money and don't trade it, when people have traded it but have no edge and haven't been losing and end up at break even. So actually the percentage of traders who are profiting will be even less. So if you're making an average of 1% per month, bravo, you're doing a fucking good job then, because most people are not doing that. But what happens when people start making these returns? Because they've got unrealistic expectations, they think, well, it's not 20% a month. I'm not really good at trading because I'm only making that. But hold on a second, what other industry could you be in the top less than 5%, like let's say top 3% or top 4% if you want to be generous, being in that top amount and still think that you're a bad trader? It's because social media has disrupted everyone's view of what it actually means to trade, what is realistic, what's achievable, what's sustainable, and that's the important word here, sustainable. And so social media is full of idiots that have just ruined this fucking industry and made it embarrassing to tell people you're a trader. That's something that we could discuss another time. You know what, I sound really bitter, and it's because I am bitter. I've decided this year, I'm so sick of this industry and what it's become, I'm just going to say it how it is from now on. I don't really care about coming across as like, I'm going to be nice about everything. I'll just say it how it is. This industry is a cesspool these days, and most of the people on YouTube are just don't know what they're talking about, and all they're doing is leading people to a path of actually failing. Because even if they don't think they are, even if they're teaching things that they think is useful information, when they start putting amounts of money in their YouTube titles and stuff like that, and quoting these ridiculous returns in their videos because they think it's going to get more clicks and views, they don't realize that they are embedding in people's minds a certain belief about what trading is that's going to lead them astray or make them feel perpetually disappointed with what they're doing and end up giving up and feel frustrated. They don't realize that that's what they're doing. And what's it in aid of? Just for them to get some clicks and to get people buying their rubbish training? No, thank you. Anyway, I told you this video is going to go on and I've just already gone on a big tangent. So that's the first problem. The next problem is the short timelines. You see, when people say that they've gone from selling fast food, not that you have a fast food salesman, but serving fast food, and 2 years later driving a Lambo, then that's going to make you think that you need to progress in 2 years, which is not going to give you the macro patience. It's going to give you urgency, which means that rather than thinking about I'm going to progress and do things in the right way, you're going to realize 6 months down the line, 12 months down the line, shit, if I want to be in a Lambo 2 years down the line, I haven't progressed enough. So then you start pushing things too quickly, moving on to trading in the live markets with real money too soon, not really caring about developing the skill, just caring about how quickly can I get to trading and making money. So you need to ground yourself with realistic expectations. What you need to realize, and we'll discuss this as well, is that trading is, well, being a trader is a profession. And trading is a complex skill. It's a multifaceted skill with lots of smaller skills that come together to be trading. And it takes time to learn that. And it's not something that you're going to just learn overnight or go for 2 years. Like, think about it. In 2 years, you'd have to have learned the skill and made enough money to have achieved the Lambo. Either they're not following their risk parameters that they're teaching to everyone, and if they're not following that, then, you know, are you going to trust in someone teaching you that can't even follow the things they're teaching you? Or they're lying, or they have loads of capital to start with. I'd say it's most likely that they're lying. And then the final thing, I almost forgot, I said I'd come back to it, is that the best way to avoid rushing to this end destination of making lots of money from trading and to actually go through the process the right way and develop the skill the right way is to be actually curious about what you're learning, to be interested in the markets, to be interested in different aspects of trading, and to sort of dive into that curiosity, and eventually it will develop into a passion. That's what happened for me. Like, I didn't start trading because I thought I'd make money from it, because I didn't really know about trading. I just knew that the markets were fascinating. It seemed bigger than I was, which is true. And it just seemed like this huge thing that I can just research and understand. And I wanted to learn everything I could about it. And it develops into a passion where over 20 years later, I'm still studying so many aspects of trading. I'm digging into research about psychology and neuroscience just to understand more about how it affects our trading. And I could put together videos like this because of it. I'm researching the way the markets work, like the underlying mechanisms and stuff, so I can understand why prices are moving the way they are. Developing theories, understanding other people's theories, and so on and so on. Spending my life basically talking about trading as well. I know some people think that we make loads of money from selling our program, but the fact is we publish our financial figures on the website on duomoinitiative.com, and you can see that the amount we make in revenue doesn't even cover our costs. I'm not making any money from this. I'm actually spending money every month to keep the company alive. That's another thing for another time. But anyway, let's move on to the second point. But sorry, just to reiterate there, like, by developing a passion, it means you're less likely to rush ahead because you're enjoying the learning process. It's not just about the making money. You're intrinsically motivated, not just extrinsically motivated, which is the better way to succeed. So I told you it's going to be a long video. Grab your coffee. And no, I don't support the Patriots. I just like the size of the mug. I mean, the mug could say, like, go meth, and I'd still drink from it. Unless it says go Spurs. You know, we all have our limits. There's no way I'm drinking out of that. So the second point is related to the first in the way it's worded, but actually it's a very different point. And it's to set the right expectations for others, or don't tell them. Now, there are a few ways that this is going to impact you. The first thing is pressure. In fact, it's all pressure. But what a lot of people do is they get excited about trading and they want to tell people around them, friends, family, partner, kids, who knows. And when they tell them about it, they're not explaining to them the realistic stuff, like we very rarely do. When we're excited about something, we tell people the good side. So in other words, when we're telling people about trading, when we're getting excited about learning it and we want them to back us on that journey, we're selling them the dream. So what happens is they haven't got the view of the downside of it all because they don't maybe know about trading in the way that you do. And all they think is like, okay, so you're going to learn this for a while and then you're going to make mega bucks and our life is going to change. And of course you want them to believe that because you want them to be excited about what you're doing as well. And so we can say that one of the things that leads to pressure is people being sold the dream. Now, you might have been sold the dream as well, but you need to get to reality like we just discussed with the first point. But when others have been sold the dream, it's going to put pressure on you because now you have expectations about timelines, about amounts of money. And what happens when you don't meet those expectations? You start feeling like a failure. You start feeling like a failure. Related to that is also from the last point, the having expectations for yourself. One of the most common phrases that I hear from young men that tell me about the negative mental problems they're going through is this expression here. I feel like I'm being left behind because everyone else went into a corporate career and they're progressing and getting promotions, and you started focusing on your trading, and now you feel like they're progressing to making money, more money, and you're not. But because you chose to go and learn a different profession, it's going to take time. But you're going to start feeling like a failure if this is what you start feeling. And if other people have expectations that you're not meeting because you didn't give them realistic expectations, you're going to feel like a failure. And what's that going to do? It's going to make it much more difficult to focus on the process. So you can't focus on the process. And it's going to want you to make you want to fast track things, which is a recipe for disaster because you're not going to be ready for it. You're going to feel like, why do I need to keep practicing stuff? Why do I need to work on developing my system? Why do I need to be back testing? Why can't I just be YOLOing all of my money and not feeling like a failure anymore? When am I going to retire my parents? So setting the right expectations for others, it's important that you manage expectations. Be realistic. Say to them, there's the possibility I could do really well from this. There's a possibility that I could be wasting my time and it will never work for me and it will be frustrating. There's also a chance that it could work for me, but it's going to be just a reasonable amount of money, and maybe I could make more from doing something else, doing a different side hustle. But I really am passionate about the markets. I'm interested in this. It's not just about the money. So even though there are other options that are maybe easier and have more of a guarantee of making money, this is the one that interests me the most. You might be able to say to them, there are going to be times when it gets tough mentally. There are going to be times where I feel like my self-esteem's taken a knock, or I'm frustrated, or I'm stressed. I need you to understand that's what I'm going to be going through. So when I'm going through those times, don't start expecting something from me or like telling me off for it or something. Like, I will need support during those times. There was this amazing thing that happened a few years ago. This woman got in touch with me and she said that her boyfriend had been learning to trade for a while, 4 or 5 years, and he was a really smart guy, like a mathematician or an engineer or something. And she wanted me to have a call with him. He didn't know that she'd arranged this because she was worried about his mental health. And I spoke to the guy, and they were sat there together, and to me, it was so lovely that the girlfriend had thought, how can she support him best? She's going to reach out to someone who he had been watching my videos and like trusted my points of view. So we had this Skype call, and she was supporting him. She was saying like, you are the most intelligent, amazing guy, and you can achieve all these things, and you're working so hard. But he couldn't accept that he was not succeeding like at the rate that he wanted to. I mean, it got really emotional at one point. But anyway, I won't go into like all of what was discussed and stuff, but the important part there was because she had the right expectations and the right understanding of it, she was able to take actions that actually supported him. And I got emails from them afterwards that things were much better because of that. Like, he just needed a bit of a pep talk from someone who had been there and done it. So there's all of that. Then there's also that people don't approve. You see, the problem is, some parents want you to be a doctor or a lawyer, and if you're not going to be a doctor or a lawyer, you're an embarrassment to the family, and that's just how it is. But also, people have this perception of trading because of the fucking idiots that I spoke about earlier, who have made trading seem like the new Herbalife or something, like multi-level marketing. I've mentioned before on Instagram about when I went to a wedding and I was sat next to this girl who I'd not really spoken to before, and she said, what do you do for a living? And I used to tell people different stories and stuff, but I just said, I trade for a living. And she said, oh, is that what those Love Island type people do on Instagram? And I was like, fuck my life, this is the perception people have of trading these days. So of course, people are not going to approve because they want to protect you. But what happens is that's going to feed into self-doubt and frustration and feeling like a failure. So if you think that your family are not going to approve, don't tell your family. Don't tell them until you're actually succeeding. Like, do they need to know other things that you're doing with your time? If you're watching football or porn or whatever else you're doing, do they need to know about that as well? Probably not. So you don't need to tell them if you're spending time learning trading either. And then just related to this is also, there are different studies about this, but the most recent and the most convincing one is that you should not talk about your goals. Should not talk about goals. Now, as I said earlier, I can't cite you the exact findings of the research because I'm doing this off the top of my head, but it essentially is that you're getting some sort of dopamine hit from like a social dopamine hit. I'll have to find the right terminology. It was social something. But basically from talking about it, your brain is feeling like you are getting the rewards that you should be getting from achieving the thing. You see, ultimately, we're doing all of this for survival, having money, resources to be able to ensure our survival, but also status, which is related to survival. So if we're getting status by telling someone about what we're going to be achieving, it's kind of satisfying the need for us. So we shouldn't talk about our goals anyway. I think the only time you should talk to your people around you about trading while you're learning is if you know you're going to need the support from them, or if they're going to be wondering what you're doing with your time, if it's necessary for them to know. If not, then just don't bother telling them. I think it's just safer that way. There's too many things that can go wrong. I've heard too many disasters from it all. And the absolute worst, please never do this, is like when someone starts learning to trade and they've started to make money for themselves and they get excited and tell everyone, and everyone's like, oh, can you do it with my money, and my money, and my money, and my money? And then suddenly, recipe for disaster. Okay, so next one, get your foundations in order. I know this sounds simple, but here's the thing. If I said to you, okay, there's this simple trick that you can implement right now. Like you see this all over YouTube. It's all the little things where it's like, trading was hard until I figured this thing out. By the way, we're going to start using these titles because no one watches our videos when we say things that are straightforward. People want this sort of clickbait rubbish. So trading was hard until I figured out this thing, or this simple trick will increase your profitability by X%, increase your success rate with this one simple thing, the strategy they don't want to tell you about, blah, blah, blah. Here's the reality. If I gave you one, I said it's guaranteed to improve your performance by 10, 15%, you'd take it. You'd pay money for it if it was guaranteed. But getting your foundations in order will achieve exactly that for you. And this is something that people neglect, and it's something that I neglected. I've talked about before. You'll find it linked down below, or I'll put it up on screen as well. My experiences of when I first started making big money from trading, hundreds of thousands of pounds, and I got so ill, I had a meltdown, a breakdown, and like I thought I was dying. Like I actually contemplated suicide at the time because my chemistry in my brain must have been so fucked and stuff at the time. You can watch the video and understand all of that. But basically it was lack of sleep. I was trading around the clock. I thought I don't want to miss an opportunity, so don't sleep. I was sleeping like 2-3 hours a night. My sleep to this day is still ruined from what happened back then. But if you can get your foundations in order, it's going to improve things in so many ways. So first of all, it's going to improve cognitive performance. To perform like that. It's going to improve cognitive performance. So you're actually going to make decisions better. You're going to see things on the charts better. You're going to be sharper, quicker reactions. You're going to be so much better, learn quicker, everything as a result of sleeping 8 hours a night, 7.5, whatever you need. Exercising. Now, there's different views on this, but I would say if you can exercise, like just do some sort of not too demanding steady state cardio at least every day, meaning basically going for a walk outside for like half an hour to 40 minutes, that'll be pretty good. And doing something a bit more active. Like me personally, I work out every day for about 40 minutes. Well, that's 4 or 5 times a week. And I go for a walk, do over 10,000 steps every single day. And it's the best thing for your mental health and everything. So I'm going to leave this one blank, but I'll say like at least like 45 minutes of like walking or something like that. Nutrition. Your brain is what you're using for your trading, and your brain is extremely metabolically expensive. There are studies done on chess grandmasters who burn through thousands of calories during a tournament. And you can imagine the decision making you're doing with your brain, where else are you going to do it? Well, you can do it with other things and it gets you in trouble, trust me. The amount of decision making and focus you're spending during a trading session, you're burning through calories. So you're going to need to replenish that. So you need to have a balanced diet. We've gone through lots of studies that are in our trader development program. By the way, in the trader development program, I think I might have mentioned that we've got over 20 hours of trading psychology lessons, which includes every aspect of it, from ways to overcome sort of deeply embedded issues that you might have, preventing issues, all research-based, optimizing your well-being, and we look at nutrition. And what the studies show is that a Mediterranean diet is going to be best for cognitive function. And if you want to know when the best time to eat is, then the first thing you should do is actually track it in your trading journal. So track when you ate, how you felt during your trading session, how was your decision making, and then you can actually find trends in like what works best for you. But otherwise, what the studies show is that it's more like a pyramid. If you imagine this is your total calories for the day, you want to have more of them early, so breakfast, lunch, dinner. You don't want to have your heavy meals at the end of the day. Breaks, you're going to need lots of breaks. There's lots and lots of studies about this, but for maintaining focus, same for nutrition and everything. Like if you want to maintain focus, you're going to need to go on breaks. The best thing you can do is to go on a break outside. Nature is like a vitamin. There are so many things that about being outside, what it does to your mental health, what it does for your focus. I don't want to get into the specifics, but basically when we are focused on a problem, then we have like a narrow attentional field of view, like we're narrowly focused on the problem, especially if we're stressed, it narrows. When we're out in nature, our attention view expands, and that helps replenish the sort of more narrow attention view. As I said, I'm doing this off the top of my head, so I can't give you the exact wording that's from the studies, but we spoke about all of this in a video on self-talk, negative self-talk. So it was the first video where we explained why and how negative self-talk happens and how it affects your trading negatively. And then the second one was the self-talk toolkit. So we'll link those down below in the description box. But you need to get outside and like not just take a break where you're scrolling on your phone. That's not going to help you recover. It's actually going to make things worse. And again, there's another video down below where it talks about the right sort of breaks to have. So all of them improve cognitive performance. All of these as well are going to help reduce or avoid stress, particularly the one that lots of young men don't give enough attention to, which is sleep, because they think sleep when you're dead, like I did. But I've changed my tune on that. Sleep is necessary for reducing stress. Likewise, if you're hungry, you're going to get more stressed. Exercise is going to give you a cocktail of neurochemicals that's going to help reduce stress, make you feel better. Same with getting outside and so on. And trading is stressful, learning to trade is stressful, all the pressure, everything. So if you want to reduce stress, get your foundations in order. The rest goes about saying hydrate properly. You know, if you don't drink enough water, if you're slightly dehydrated, it starts to get to the equivalent of actually having drank a bit of alcohol, like in terms of how you function cognitively. So if you want to improve your performance, get your foundations in order. It's going to avoid a lot of the trading psychology issues. I mean, think about when people get hangry and stuff. Well, that's obviously the food is affecting their brain. You know, we need homeostasis. Then like all of these different things are sort of leading towards that. And when we don't have homeostasis, or when things are in disorder, then it's going to have an impact on the way we make decisions, our emotions, our feelings, our attitudes, our everything. Okay, so the next point is don't learn to trade with real money. Now, this is something that a lot of people will disagree with me on, because they say that you can't learn to trade with fake money because trading's so about trading psychology, and when there's real money on the line, then it feels more real and your decision making changes and blah, 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 blah. I get it. It's important at some point to be in your development to have real money, but only when you're ready for it. You don't do that right at the start. You go through different phases and then you move on to having real money, because even if you are profitable in a demo account, when you start trading with real money, it can change things a lot. There's a video we'll have coming out at some point of someone that felt a difference between being profitable in their demo account. This is one of our members, very profitable in their demo account, ready to go for funding, went through the funding process, and it's almost like all of the principles they've been following, everything went out the window, and they were trading a bit like an amateur at times. And we talk about why that happens and how to avoid it. But there's an important reason. So that's the point of like why you need to learn with real money at some point. But if you learn at the start with real money, it can cause a disaster. First of all, obviously you're going to lose money, but that's not related to trading psychology directly. The thing that is related to trading psychology is conditioned responses. Now, conditioned response is an automatic behavior that's triggered by a stimulus that should have been neutral or was previously neutral. So the famous example of this is Pavlov's dogs. Does that ring a bell? Sorry, terrible but dad joke there. But these are basically automatic. Why did I say that on camera? Jeez. automatic behaviours. Now, again, I can't give you the sort of exact wording that comes from the studies, but a conditioned response in many cases is going to happen when your brain is processing a highly emotional situation, that some of it gets processed sort of non-consciously. Some of it's conscious processing, some of it's non-conscious. And it's a way of protecting you. Like, imagine back thousands of years ago, suddenly there's a saber-toothed tiger. I don't know if we were around at the same time as saber-toothed tigers. There's a tiger. There's a tiger that comes out of the bush and is about to attack you. Well, in order to protect you, and you manage to escape, in order to protect you in future, your body or your brain is going to pick up on certain stimuli from the situation that when you notice those things in future, you're going to react with fear and get out of the way. It's conditioned response, okay? It's there for survival. So it happens from highly emotional situations. But the thing is, it's not only from highly negatively emotional situations, it's also from positive emotional ones. And the trading environment is the perfect breeding ground for conditioned responses. And so a lot of trading psychology issues that people have are actually conditioned responses. And funnily enough, a lot of them, so let's put that down, lots of issues are that, but many of them come from when you were learning. Okay. Because that's when you're risking too much money, forcing trades, over trading. And if you're risking a huge amount of money, like when people have an account where they've got some leverage and they could be over leveraged, that they can risk everything on one trade, and in the space of an hour, either they've lost their entire account or they've made a huge profit. Both are going to be highly emotional experiences that's going to partly be a conditioned response that could shape them for the rest of their trading career. There was a guy that got in touch with me a few years back. He was living in Dubai, and he said that he was a very successful trader. He had a trading system that was working really well. He showed me all the data and everything. But during, I think it was the financial crisis, or maybe it was one of the sort of sovereign debt crises after that, he made some mistakes that cost him a huge amount of money. So he went from something like $4-5 million that he had in capital at the time to a few $100,000, something like that. And you imagine the emotional experience. You're basically, when you make a loss like that, you're grieving, and grief can affect you in so many weird and crazy ways. It's like, in that moment, he was probably feeling suicidal. He was worried about his family. I mean, this guy's in his 40s. So he wanted to have a call with me, and I had this video call, and like on Skype, his camera comes on, and he's got, I'm not kidding you, like 20 or 30 screens around him. And he was like, this because he used to have this trading team of like mathematicians and stuff that were working on these systems with him, and he couldn't afford to pay them anymore after he like lost all the money, but he still got all the screens there. It was like looking at like Star Trek or something, or like, you know, those adverts for like Tony Robbins where he's facing all the screens of the people. It's like that, right? Anyway, I'm talking to this guy, and he's saying as soon as he opens a trade now, he starts shaking, he gets nervous, he's sweating, that he has to close it just to stop the symptoms. And he's like, well, like, what's going on? I know when I open a trade, it's going to be profitable because I've got all the data from my system. I know exactly when I should be entering, but I can't keep the trades open. What do I do? And it was because he's got conditioned responses. And this is what happens with beginners when they use real money. They develop these, and then they wonder later down the line why they can't overcome these simple things like moving their stop loss when the price moves towards it. They've learned by then that these things they're doing are irrational, they're illogical, they're only going to ruin their performance, but they can't help themselves. And it's because a conditioned response, a lot of the time, is not coming from your conscious brain. Well, in fact, all the time, it's not coming from your conscious brain, it's coming from pre-conscious thought processes. And pre-conscious thought processes, that is in the phrase itself, pre-conscious, is happening before your conscious brain even knows what's going on. But what happens is that your conscious brain wants to create narratives and tie things together to make sense of the world around you. So when you take an action, you'll explain why you're doing that action, when actually it wasn't you taking the action, it was your pre-conscious brain reacting, and you're then explaining why you were doing it. And there was a study that John Coates, the neuroscientist, former trader, did with his team, where they were actually assessing traders on a Wall Street trading floor, and they could see the volatility in the markets were in tune with or correlated in some way to what was going on in their brain. and there were certain actions they were taking in relation to that, but then they were explaining it when they were asked about it, like giving a narrative of what happened that actually wasn't even connected with it at all. It's really fascinating. We'll discuss it sometime. But these can become really difficult to overcome, and it's going to take most of the time like cognitive therapy to overcome, which is much more difficult and time consuming than just not trading with real money in the first place. Also, this makes people more obsessed with the end goal of making money rather than the process of learning. Money rather than process. And I've seen this with lots of people who go through funding challenges. There was a guy who was working on my team for a while who is not with us anymore. He's not passed away, he's not on the team anymore. I always say that, I always have to correct myself. And he wasted a year because he was just chasing funding accounts. Like this years before he joined the team, he was chasing funding accounts when he wasn't ready. But because like the sort of lure of possibly making money that you don't already have from your trading, it's like, well, why do I want to go back to the drawing board and work on my skill? It's like you get hooked. It's an addiction. There are some people in our community who got to the stage where they thought they were ready for funding, and they said they'll go through the funding process just as a learning experience, but then it changes their focus. And then they finish that funding process, and rather than it being the experience, the learning experience they thought it was going to be, it just gets them hooked on the cycle of going for the funding account again. So rather than going back and working on developing their skill, they just go back to trying to figure out how to pass the funding challenge next. So if that is happening early in your trading career, that you're obsessed with the money side rather than the process, it's just going to lead to the urgency and it's going to stunt your development. So let's move on to the next point. I knew this was going to be a long video, but I think this is going to be really long. I'm not sure if we're going to release it like this, but we'll see. If it's dragging on, I'm sorry. Some of you are going to love it. Some of you are going to hate it. We'll see how it goes. If it works out, then fine, we could do more videos like this. Maybe if you want more videos like this, let me know in the comments, but don't be a fucking Karen. But luckily, I think we can get through this one quite quickly because this relates to other things that we've discussed. So first of all, it's important to have a development plan, right? You need to be following a plan. And we put a video out a little while ago about what we call our monthly transformation contests. And there's a template there that you can follow for exactly how to plan what you should be focusing on each month, because you need to have something that's the focus. You need to be setting yourself clear goals. That's how you get in a flow state. That's how you avoid getting distracted and going on these side quests that lead you nowhere. So you need a development plan. And here's the trick, right? If you work your way from the end, so start with the end goal and work your way backwards from there. And if you've researched enough and spoken to enough people that you can like guarantee that these are the exact right steps in the right order, and you know that there's no better way than what you've planned here, because if you just follow these steps, if you stay focused and do these things and hit these milestones, you will hit your goal. If you can feel that way about your plan, you will stick to your plan. Because a lot of the time, the problem people have is that they put together a plan that they don't actually fully believe in, as they don't stick to it, because in the moment when they're sat there about to work on something, they feel like something else is a more pressing issue, more urgent, more important to work on, because they don't believe in their plan in the first place. So then it makes you think, what's the point of the plan? But it's important with the plan that you are realistic with it. Don't set arbitrary goals or deadlines. What do I mean by that? So arbitrary goal is things like, I'll make 100K profit by the end of the year. By end of year. Or I'll be funded this year. These are arbitrary goals. Why? Because you don't know if you'll be ready for these things. One, like this, well, this one is an arbitrary profit goal. You see, you want to set goals that are fully in your control. Profit targets, things like that, are partly down to the market, and that's not in your control. So what are you going to do? End up risking more to try and hit it if you're not getting the opportunities. It doesn't make sense. But these arbitrary goals, all they're going to do is accelerate, make you try to accelerate your development even when it's not possible to. You're not going to develop in the way that's like right for you. You're going to try and push ahead too quickly. It's kind of like if you're going to the gym or something and you've decided that by the end of the year, like you've just started at the gym, and you decide that by the end of the month, you're going to bench 100 kilos, right? And you've never benched before in your life. Then you're going to be progressing through the weights too quickly. You're going to be ego lifting. You're going to injure yourself. You're going to look like an idiot. But it doesn't make sense. And it's the same thing here. It's like if you're setting yourself an arbitrary goal, you're not going in the like you're not progressing in a way that's right for you. Like going to the bench press example, it would be much better to say that each session I'm going to try to add an extra rep or up the weight. I will add an extra rep until I hit 12 reps, and then I'm going to up the weight until I can only do 8 reps, and then I'll build up until I can do 12, and so on each session. Something like that. Progressive overload. Same thing. Same with deadlines, right? If I say, okay, I'm going to be a profitable trader by end of 2025, and I just started learning, then who says, like, what's that based on? Just plucking it out of thin air. Like, you might as well say tomorrow or like 2027. It's no difference. Instead, you'll be profitable when you're profitable. I'm going to focus on the process. These are the actions I need to take. This is the steps. These are the steps that are going to lead me there. Whenever I'm going to work my hardest on each step one at a time, and when I hit the milestone, I'm ready to progress. However long that takes, whatever is needed, I will give it my all. That's all. Because otherwise, it's just going to lead to higher risk, urgency. We've talked about urgency being one of the worst things for someone developing as a trader. It's just going to mess with your head. You're going to start feeling like a failure when you're not hitting these arbitrary goals that you set. And for what reason? You've plucked them out of thin air. No one's forced you. No one's chasing you. You've chosen them, and now you've screwed up your mental health. Well done. Who am I ranting at? Everyone. I'm ranting at everyone. Okay, so number 6. This is a really, really important one. It's so important that I'm going to do this. I'm going to circle it. I'm going to put little stars. I want you to pay attention to this one. Risk is the volume dial for trading psychology, and that's the individual trade risk and the personal risk. What that means is the trade risk. When you take a trade and you decide I'm going to risk 10, 15% of my account on that trade, you are amplifying everything in your mind. You are amplifying the loss aversion that you'll feel. You'll have all of these trading psychology issues or symptoms that have been dormant that will suddenly emerge. And the reason is quite simple. Your brain handles different risks and different dangers in a very similar way. So there's a whole list of them that they found that your brain processes in a similar way. There's obviously physical, let's put dangers. Physical, social, like are you going to be embarrassing yourself in front of the group and out of the group? And there are others, but basically financial, okay? Now think about it. When you're in physical danger, what do you feel like? Palms are sweating, like there's a whole physiological process that happens, and then you go through fight or flight. Now, those of you who are afraid of public speaking, imagine stepping on stage in front of thousands of people. What's going to happen? Your palms are going to be sweating, you might freeze, you might go through fight or flight where you actually want to get out of there, or kick someone's head in if you're going to fight. Just joking, obviously. But this is what happens with the financial side as well. There are parts of your brain, as I said before, it's like non-conscious. It's the lower parts of your brain, the more primitive parts, that are there for survival. And when you think you're in danger, it's going to kick in for that fight or flight. And your conscious mind is not going to be processing the situation or in control of the situation. Your survival mechanisms are in control. So the more you increase your risk on your trade, the more financial danger you potentially have, and the less consciously you're going to be processing things. Your loss aversion is going to be amplified, and that has so many different sort of avenues that come off this that affect your trading in lots of different ways. It basically means that when you're running in a loss, you'd rather have the uncertainty of possibly having a bigger loss, but possibly not having a loss at the end of that, so leave the trade running, rather than the certainty of having a loss. And when you move into profit, you'd rather have the certainty of banking that profit than the uncertainty of having a bigger profit, but also maybe getting back into a loss. In other words, you close your profits too soon and you hold your losses for too long. And the more money you have at risk, the more that's going to happen. Because when you're running into a loss and your drawdown on that open trade is now hitting 5%, you're like, shit, I don't want to hit a 5% on my account, negative 5%. I'll hold on in case we can come back up this way. Whereas if that was running at like a 0.5%, you're more willing to stick to the plan and do what's right for the trade rather than what's right for the balance. And there are so many other psychological problems that come up when you have bigger amounts of risk. Like you might lose a lot of money, develop a conditioned response is one thing, but also then put more money in, putting good money after bad because you want to make that money back. maybe you can't quite afford that, you lose that. I hear from lots of people that then get themselves into debt to try and recover that previous money, and it goes on and on and on. And in lots of cases with some of the really bad retail brokers, they don't help you because they'll call you up and be like, hey, we noticed that you don't have any money in your account. Why don't you put some money in? We can help you, blah, blah, blah. And it just, the hole gets bigger and bigger. And then people think trading's gambling, it doesn't work, and they give up. When really the problem was them risking too much to begin with. So that's the trade risk, and I don't think I need to go on and on about it. You'll find in the description box videos that relate to that. But the personal risk, you know, we said that social dangers as well. We will do what we can to avoid losing status. And so if we've set the wrong expectations with people, so if like, there are a few things here. So let's say people's expectations, let's say that we've given up our job, we're relying on trading for income, we've set ourselves a deadline to like, we've got to achieve it by this time or got to do something else. Like a lot of people, it's surprising how many times this has come up that someone said to me, oh, my parents want me to go to university or something like that, but they've given me 6 months to make trading work or something. All these things, or like feeling left behind, yeah, you get the idea. Anyway, this creates personal risk. These are increasing the level of jeopardy with your trading. So suddenly it's turning up the risk on that side, which means it's going to affect your trading psychology. You feel more pressure. Every trade is going to feel like a setback. You know, this is something that I think we'll probably get to in a little while as well. But if we go back to the topic of scarcity or an urgency, when you have all of these things, it's making each trade feel like it's scarce and it's urgent, because if you miss an opportunity, it's like, shit, now I'm like falling behind. I could have been closer to what I needed to achieve here. Or if a trade ends up in a loss, which is expected because probabilities, you'll feel like it's a setback. Not just a setback in terms of money, but also a setback in terms of time. So that's going to lead to you then forcing trades, over trading, and so on. So if you keep your risk in check, no more than 2% of your account at risk, per trade, and there's some confusion about this sometimes for people that trade equities. I'm not saying 2% of your capital invested, 2% at risk, meaning on any trade, the most you can lose is 2%, but that should be the upper part of your parameter. So imagine that you've got this scale. This is your upper and lower parameters, and you can decide what you want the upper and the lower to be, but the upper should be no more than 2%. Some people might say, oh, I don't feel comfortable risking that much, so maybe it's 1.5%. And at the lower end, well, it's not worth my time to be trading any less than 0.3% because then I'm earning less than minimum wage or something like that. Then, depending on the opportunity, depending on the expectancy or the probability or whatever you want to base it on, then you have different amounts. So maybe here it's like, okay, this trade's going to be 0.45%. Oh, this one's a really good opportunity, it's going to be 1.7%, and so on. It's dynamic position sizing. But always keeping a maximum of 2% because you don't want to have all of this other shit kicking in that will kick in. And I know some people will look at their system, they'll look at the Kelly criterion and so on, and they'll be like, but I could risk more. You could, but don't. And there's a video linked in the description box that explains why the 2% risk management rule is so important. So let's move on. So solve the root cause. Most trading psychology issues are symptoms, not the problem themselves. And they all usually come down to lack of skill, shitty approach, method we'll call it, or poorly formulated system. We did a whole video about this explaining how some of the most common trading psychology issues are actually a skill issue. You see, if you have, let's say that you've got all of this sorted, you've developed the skill, you are not using a shitty method, you're using a good one, and you've got a well-formulated system, then what you're going to end up with is good data. Okay, good data is important that it's consistent because then you can rely on it. If you're taking a slightly different approach for each and every trade, your data is going to be meaningless because you know each trade is independent. But if you've got data from a consistent approach, and it shows you that you have an edge. And we released a video recently about how to measure your edge, which people disagreed with me about it because they don't quite understand it, I think. But once you do understand it, you'll see that it's a really great approach. And I'm going to do a follow-up video about that to explain the things that maybe people need to understand to see why it's so good. But if you have this, most trading psychology issues are resolved. Let's say, for example, that we play a coin flip game. This is the queen, even though it's now King Charles in there, but I prefer the queen. So you're doing a coin flip, and if it's heads, you're going to make £2, and if it's tails, you're going to pay out £1. Okay? Now, let's say that, and it's a fair coin, right? It's not one of these like weighted coins that's going to go on one side or the other. It's completely fair. So there's a 50% chance of this and a 50% chance of this. So let's say you're flipping this coin and you lose 10 times in a row. So you've now had to give up £10. Are you going to have any issue flipping the coin the next time? No, because you know you've got a massive edge there, and you know that over a short sample size of 10 flips, there could be a lot of variability, but over the long run, you're going to be making money. So just flip the coin as many times as you can until the other person that's paying out all the money realizes how stupid they are and stops the game. You keep flipping the coin. So if you have good data that shows that you have an edge, you will keep playing the game. You will keep flipping the coin. The problem that people have is that they don't have good data, or they don't have data at all, good or bad. They don't collect it. But when you have bad data, it's going to be lack of skill, shitty trading method, or poorly formulated system. Poorly formulated system is because that's what's going to lead you to being inconsistent, and lack of skill and shitty method is going to lead to you having negative expectancy. If you solve those problems and you know that you have an edge, you no longer have most of your trading issues. Okay, I won't go into much detail about all of this one because we'll link the video below, and I know that I'm going to let this video get out of hand otherwise. But you see, the thing with this is just my final point here. Most trading gurus have lack of skill, shitty method, poorly formulated system, and there's no way for you to actually test their approach because it's quite vague. It's not nicely defined where you can say, okay, these are the parameters so I can now test it and see if it does work the way that you say it does. Like the Duomo method is nicely defined, we can test it. And I've given you the objective way to test if you have an edge in one of our last videos, which is what we encourage our members to do, to prove that objectively we have an edge. But most trading gurus will not have that. Instead, what they do have is a system that's fairly vague, so that there's this grey area that they can say, oh no, it would have been profitable if you did this. And then they blame people's psychology. No, you've got everything you need for like following the right approach, but you just don't have the right mindset. You're having like a loser mindset or whatever, like nonsense shit stuff. And that's their easy excuse. Then people blame themselves rather than blaming the mentor until they develop enough experience over time that they see how illogical all the trading approaches are. Whether it's, I'm going to get myself in trouble, just like when I did the chart patterns video, the traditional chart patterns, when those were popular, and everyone bashed me in the comments and said, I don't know what I'm talking about. Then suddenly everyone moves on to the next fad trading approach, and then they agree with me on that one. But whether it's the ICT, SMC, KFC, JCB, whatever approach, there are illogical things about them. Let's leave it at that. And it's not always just about your trading psychology while you're failing or succeeding. You know those trading approaches, right? It's like a circle jerk in the social media comments. And online, it feels like people care more about, in the comments, proving that they know about that technique more than other people in the comments. Oh no, that's not an FVG because it's this and this. They care more about that than actually whether they can test that approach to see if it's profitable and whether it's working for them. They care more about the social status. Because I think most people with their trading, as long as they're satisfying that social status, then that's all they need. Rather than getting it from playing a computer game, they can get it from being in the comments section on a popular trading approach. But if there are that many people learning that trading approach and using it, why are not so many more of them profiting from it? It's just the same as the 95%. There's 5% that are. Anyway, moving on. I'm just going to get myself in trouble here. 1, for this video being so long, and 2, for making comments like that. Always know where or when your next decision points are. Really straightforward. Whenever you enter a trade, whenever you take an action, even if the action when the trade's open is to hold and not take any action, that's still a decision that you've taken. When you take that decision, always know when or where, or both, when and where, your next decisions will be. So let's say that I've entered short here, okay, and I decide that this is going to be my next decision point. Decision point. Price reaches it. And when we get there, I decide I'm going to hold a bit longer. But I now know, okay, my next decision point will be if it gets up here. DP, no dirty minds, please. And maybe I've got some analysis that showed me down here as well. So price gets down here. Now I decide I'm going to scale out. Next decision point will be if it breaks above here. Next decision point is going to be down here. But actually, there's an economic data release coming out. So now it's 11:30, and maybe by 1 o'clock I need to make a decision. So by 1 o'clock the price is here, and I decide to exit the trade. Now, when you already know where your next decision points will be, it stops you being reactive, because a lot of people enter a trade and then the price moves and they're like, oh, should I exit? That's moved quite quickly. No, let's take the profit there. Or it goes against them and like, oh, that's looking a bit dangerous. Let's get out. You stop yourself being reactive, and what you're doing is leaving the decision-making process for when you're more rational, when you're thinking clearer. Because when you're moving into a profit or into a loss, just like we spoke about earlier, there are certain aspects that you're reacting, like you have physical reactions, automatic behaviors will come into play, emotions and so on. If you want the most clarity, set your decision points ahead of time and what the decision is going to be. If it's like this, if it's like that, or if expectancy is positive, stay in the trade. If it's above what it was before, scale in. If it's gone negative, exit the trade. Like, make things straightforward, but always know where or when your next decision points are, and then it just solves so many bloody trading psychology issues. Most issues, it's like people not knowing what to do next and sort of dithering and worrying, and that's not how trading should be. It should be a lot more clinical. It should be more logical, not so bloody emotional, which is ironic because we come on to the next point, which is emotions can be an advantage. The problem is you just haven't developed your awareness of them yet. So everyone always says you want to be emotionally neutral. I used to say that as well. I didn't know what I was talking about, but clearly. Well, I thought I knew what I was talking about, but the research proves that I was wrong. And I'm not afraid to say that I was wrong, and I've corrected myself. And in our program, we go into a lot of detail about this. It's years, I'm talking years and years ago that I was wrong with it. Like, for years now, we've been saying about emotions. There's a really long video where I've gone into all of the research and explained how your brain works and all this sort of stuff, and even more detail in our program. But I'll link it down below, link it up here maybe as well. Watch it. Some people like it because we go into the research. Some people don't like it because they don't want to hear about the research. You can't please everyone on YouTube. One idiot commented saying it's the most boring video on YouTube. I'm not here to entertain you. I'm here to talk about trading and teach you stuff. So if you find it boring, so be it. I don't care. I say that, but I do care. I want things to be interesting. This one, it clearly is not going to be. It's just going to be a long, drawn-out conversation. But anyway, so better than people saying that you need to be emotionally neutral is when people say that they have become emotionally neutral, right? This is the clear sign of when someone is a bullshitter, because it is next to impossible, unless you've got some form of brain damage, to be emotionally neutral, to have no emotions, because we are built to move. The decision-making processes that take place in our brain, the connections are intertwined with connections to our body. When we think about something, we don't just think about it in our brain as if our brain is some computer that's in isolation. We feel it as well. That's why in some of the most emotionally impactful situations, when you have fear, love, excitement, and so on, you don't just think it, you feel it. So when things happen in the markets, we feel these things. Why? Because we are built for our thought processes to lead to action, to lead to movement, to lead to us doing something. You can't switch off, you can't sever the connections. It just doesn't happen. We aren't this computer. We aren't like the brain in a fucking vase or whatever. Vase. I don't know. Glass container. Oh, jeez. I've been talking too much. Brain in a vase. That sounds like a band name. An emo band. Brain in a vase. I like that. Gonna trademark it. So you can't be emotionally neutral. We are built to move. You see, the thing is, there are studies about this. And my favourite one is about the sea squirt. It's not a study, it's actually an analogy, but using the sea squirt. And the analogy is that if we didn't need to move, then we wouldn't have a brain. Like if we didn't need to move, if we like stay in one place, we wouldn't need the brain and we would ingest it because a brain is metabolically expensive. It takes up too much energy. So the sea squirt has a brain and it moves around until it becomes the sort of static thing that just stays in one place. I can't remember what they're called now, tourniquet or something. And it ingests its brain in order to become this static thing. So it's the same for us. We are built to move. We're going to feel the thoughts that we have. So you can't become emotionally neutral. Then we can talk about like the somatic marker hypothesis and how feelings are used as part of our decision-making process. The reason we're able to make decisions so rapidly is because we feel the alternatives that we're going through to make a decision. There's actually stories of from neuroscientists who wrote about this. I think it was it Joseph Ledeur or was it Damasio? I can't remember off the top of my head. Who had the patient and he had brain damage that he wasn't able to feel to make his decisions by feeling things, and they were seeing if he wanted to make like when his next appointment should be, and it was taking him so long going through it because he's thinking about almost like a big decision tree of all the different alternatives. But if I go at this time, then this is going to happen, and that interferes with this, and going on and on and on. Whereas someone could just be like, yeah, Thursday 9 o'clock works for me because they can feel the decisions. That's an oversimplification, okay? But if you watch the video about emotions, I explain it there as well. So we can't become emotionally neutral, first of all. It's impossible. So what's the best thing to do? Is to become aware of your emotions. Now, there was a study that was done on investors, or maybe it was traders, basically market participants, about emotions and decision making. And what they found was, surprisingly, the ones who felt their emotions more intensely had better returns. But there is a sort of disclaimer with this, which is that it's if you are aware of your emotions. So intense emotions are good if you're aware of them. So what does that mean? It means being able to notice and name them. So there's, I can't remember the abbreviation that's used, but it's basically this: anticipate, notice, and name. Anticipate that you're going to feel things. So rather than going through your trading session and be like, oh, got to the end of it, like, I don't know what I felt. Anticipate you're going to feel emotions, notice when they emerge, and name what the emotion is. The more specifically you can name and identify your emotions, the better you'll be able to use them for information. We'll come on to the information bit in a second. So you want to not just be looking at primary emotions like fear and so on, but also looking at secondary emotions, because the more specific you can get, the better. And it comes with practice. Not everyone's good at this to start with, but the more you anticipate, notice, and name, the better you'll get at it. And it's really important you do it in the moment and not afterwards, because in hindsight, it changes your view of things. So in the moment, you need to be taking note in your trading journal about these things. So what I would do is at different points, like before entering a trade, during the trade, after exiting the trade, and any moments where you feel emotions emerging, you take note of it in your journal. You could also set random alerts for during the day where the alert goes off, and during that time you just take note in an emotions tracker what you're feeling at that time. Okay, then you get better at it. Because here's the thing, emotions carry information. The same way we talked about conditioned responses, we subconsciously pick up on stimulus from, or like different aspects of a situation we've been in and store it as information, but we don't have that information consciously. And sometimes we're not even like, we'll be picking up on such a subtle thing that consciously we don't even know, like we wouldn't even be aware of this thing at all. Like we didn't pick it up in the first place, we're not picking up on it now, but it might be important information. You know when you walk down a street and just something makes you feel uneasy, like something bad's about to happen, and then it does, and you're like, I knew that was going to happen. That's that same kind of thing. So I won't go through the examples because they're in that long video, and I know this video is going to drag on and on if I go through every example and reiterate what I've said in other videos. but watch that video, watch it in detail, take notes and process it and think about what that means for your trading. And what you'll realize is that you've been lied to about emotions being a disadvantage. They can be an advantage as long as you're aware of them, because they're giving you information that you wouldn't have otherwise. And what is it about trading that's going to help you to succeed is having better information and processing it better. So let's move on to the next point, which is to develop your probabilistic thinking and to rely on probabilities more. All right, I had to take a break from the screen for a second, just in case it sounds different or looks different or anything. Now you'll know why. Now, before we come to this point, I want to point out that I talk about probabilities a lot on this channel, and it's something I'm going to go on and on about this year, because it's the one thing I've noticed that in the trading industry, everyone says like trading is a game of probabilities, but people don't use probabilities as part of their trades. They just use it as like understanding their success rate or some other nonsense. And so I keep putting out videos explaining situations where probabilities are so important, or ways to use probabilities to improve your trading, ways to measure your accuracy of probabilities. And it's because it's so important. And so I just want to point out, for this one, there's a link down in the description box to a free training. And please just go and sign up for it and keep an open mind and watch the whole training. And it's like an hour long, and I'm going to explain different elements of this to you so that you can sort of understand the point of view. And then in the weeks after that, I'm going to send you more free training of different things that are going to help your trading and help you to think more probabilistically, if that's the right word to use. Also in the description box, while I'm at it, there are other free resources there. One of them, which is extremely relevant to this topic, is how to track your trading and to keep a trading journal. Even if you are keeping a trading journal, go and download that. It's a free PDF, it's quite detailed, just in case there's something that you're missing there that could be helpful for you, or if you haven't started keeping one yet, you need to keep one. All of this stuff we're going through, keeping a journal is going to help you track what's going on in your mind and how to improve your trading sessions, how to improve your trading performance in so many different ways. So go and download that PDF. And then, so I'm also trying to log into my iPad at the same time because I've got my notes here, but there's also one about transforming your trading, PDF, which relates to the video that I mentioned earlier. That's about how to structure things like each month, what to focus on to improve your trading. So again, a detailed PDF for you. We give so much away for free. You don't even have to I would recommend joining our trader development program. Honestly, it's the most detailed, the most comprehensive training out there. We go into so much research in the different areas related to trading psychology. Our trading approach is logical. You can objectively measure how it's working or whether it's working. We have a great community, and if you want to join that, then I'd recommend going through our free stuff first. Our free stuff is much better than everyone's paid stuff because they haven't got the experience or they don't really care in the way that we do. And if you decide, no, I don't really care about your trading approach, I just want to learn the psychology side, then send us an email and we can sort out you getting access to the psychology and neuroscience sections of the program instead. Although, as you'll find out later, or in fact, as we've already been through, most trading psychology issues are resolved from the trading approach itself and the skill side. So I think it's much better if you actually go through the full program. But anyway, I thought I'd mention that now because otherwise it will get lost somewhere in the video, and I want to make a point of it because I feel like a lot of people don't realize how much value we can give you just from signing up, and that we actually care about helping your trading. And it's not just something we say, it's something we actually show and we do, unlike what you see elsewhere. So developing your probabilistic thinking and relying on probabilities more. Now, these are two separate things. They might sound like they're the same, but it's actually, in terms of trading psychology, two separate things. So, probabilistic thinking. When you start quantifying the probabilities of a situation, it changes the way that your brain processes the situation. So, there was a guy about a century ago or so who, and again, I'm doing this off the top of my head, so I can't think off the top of my head who it was now, what his name was. It will come to me, who made the distinction between a risk and an uncertainty. So a risk is something with quantifiable probabilities, and an uncertainty is something that has no quantifiable probabilities. So, for example, to give you the difference between the two, imagine that I have two glass jars, not a vase with a brain in it this time, two glass jars, and we've got red and blue balls in them, each of them. One of them I tell you there's 60 red balls and 40 blue balls. And in the other one, I tell you, I don't know, I'm not going to tell you how many of each are in there, but both have 100 balls, but one you know it's 60-40, the other one you don't know. And I say you can choose one, and if you pick out the blue ball, you're going to get a tenner, okay, £10. Then most people are going to choose the one with the quantifiable amount, or like the one that's the risk, not the uncertainty. So this one's a risk, this one's an uncertainty. The one that's quantifiable is risk, the other one's an uncertainty. Now, studies have been done on these to show what people prefer, what people feel more comfortable with, but also what goes on in your brain. And your brain actually processes a risk and an uncertainty differently. So just from quantifying the probabilities of a situation with a trade, and you turn it from an uncertainty into a risk, your brain, I'm going to draw a brain like this, look, this is a brain. Your brain processes it, this is the frontal cortex, there we go, brain. Your brain processes it differently. With an uncertainty, then it's relying a lot more on things like your amygdala. It's going to be more emotionally driven, because think about it. If you hear a noise, and you if thousands of years ago you hear a noise that sounds like it could be a predator, but you don't know, like a loud noise, so you're not sure what it is, then what sort of response are you going to want? More of like a fear-based one, automatic response, get the fuck out of there. Whereas if it's like a loud noise, but you can hear that it's a tiger having a fight with something else, and it's not related to you, and they're attacking each other. A hippo and a tiger. I'm probably coming out with some absolute nonsense. These things probably can't even happen. Then it's a risk, and you can actually decide based on the probability. You can make a logical decision. Okay, so they sound like they're by the watering hole. They aren't near me. They're more engaged with each other. I'm probably okay being where I am now, but I should start moving my way away from there when the noise stops. Then I know that they're not attacking each other anymore. Suddenly your decision making could be more logical. It's not so like, shit, get the fuck out of here. It's like thinking it through. So it's about quantifying the probabilities that it changes the way your brain works. So it's not just about probabilistic thinking for your trades, but just life in general. Everything's about probabilities. You don't realize it, but when you're making decisions in your everyday life, you're making assessments of probabilities, estimates of probabilities. We use something in our day-to-day life called Bayesian cognition, and it's surprisingly accurate. And it's something we'll talk about in a separate video when we talk about why the approach that I was explaining before about measuring your edge is so useful, and how people are estimating probabilities without realizing they are. I'm going to prove it in that video, and we'll talk about it more then. So developing your probabilistic thinking, but also then relying on probabilities more. This is going to improve your trading psychology in many ways. So first of all, this is going to stop you reacting with like fear and all of that kind of stuff, and being it's going to stop you from being pre-conscious or non-conscious and be more consciously thinking about things. Okay, and it's also that you can measure your success much better and be more dependable, but that relates to this, relying on your probabilities more. The biggest thing here is it's going to stop you hesitating with your trades. Most traders, when they open a trade, they're trying to decide whether they think that trade is going to end up in a profit or not. So they will accept logically, rationally, that trading is a game of probabilities. There's always a chance of losing and a chance of profiting. But then when they come to open a trade, they're saying, do I think this will be a profit? And what that means is that they're trying to go from having an uncertain situation, they're somehow trying to transform that into being a certain situation. But they can't. If it's an uncertainty, they can't transform it. The markets, to an extent, are uncertain. So they're trying to answer a question that's impossible for them to answer. Now, when we're trying to figure something out like that, our brain goes through a strategy known as explore, exploit. So explore means looking for more information until eventually we've got enough information that we can exploit. But the problem is, if something's uncertain, your explore phase is looking for a certainty that doesn't exist. You know, when people are looking for all these different signs that add up to a trade entry, where they're adding more indicators and looking for all this confluence. I see it all the time on YouTube as well, from people that are like showing off that they're really successful. There's one guy who I can't name names yet. At some point I'll do that, but I don't want the drama. He just talks about, oh, these are all the different strategies that I use, and he's just layering them on top of each other. He's like one of the most popular ones on YouTube, but it's nonsense. All it is a case of over-the-top exploring, because you're trying to somehow, by increasing the amount of information, you're trying to gain more certainty, but all you're doing is increasing your confidence level, not certainty level, and they're two different things. So people get in this endless cycle. It's like people doom scrolling on the news when like COVID was around, that they're trying to look for some certainty in a situation that was uncertain. The way that we move to the exploit phase is to have some sort of trigger. When is it enough? When have we explored enough? When do we start to exploit? And the way to do this is to rely on probabilities. If you say that you're going to enter a trade when it's positive expectancy being positive outcome multiplied by probability of that minus negative outcome multiplied by the probability of that. So if that's positive, okay, I'm going to enter the trade. Well, now when is it the time to trigger that? At the point where I have enough information that I can estimate the probabilities. How will I know when it's time to estimate the probabilities? My system dictates that. My system is going to tell me the steps I need to follow, what factors I need to consider for estimating the probabilities. And when I've ticked those boxes, I know I can now estimate the probabilities, and then I can exploit if it's positive expectancy. And then you say, yeah, but how do you know what's like at this stage if your probability is going to be accurate? Well, you collect them up collect all of them up over time, and then use what we talked about in that video of the EPBR calibration, and that's going to help you see over time if you're accurate. You're not looking at whether each individual one is accurate. It's impossible to know. So rely on the probabilities more. Likewise with like your trading performance, like having a losing streak, having a great month, bad month. Well, it's all based on probabilities. If you know the data from your system overall, you can understand the probability of having a losing streak of 10 losses in a row. It'll be a much higher percentage than you think. People often use the wrong calculation for it. If you use the losing streak calculator, you can figure it out better. Just briefly, the way people get that calculation wrong is that they look at, they do like the simple calculation that's effectively telling them what's the chance of like 10 losses in a row in the next 10 trades, okay? And that's not the right calculation, because of course that's going to be a really low percentage. They're always like, oh, there's only like a 0.56% chance of that, so I'm fine with this approach. Instead, what you need to look at is what's the chance of 10 losses in a row at any time in 1,000 trades? And that's a very different calculation, and the percentage is going to be much, much higher. Like if you have let's say that your success rate or your probability is 50%, then that was 5, not 3, 50%, then this is going to be very low, but this one's going to be extremely high. Okay, so relying on probabilities stops you panicking when you have a losing streak, and stops you then changing things with your system or doing things that are counterproductive and are only going to sabotage you. And developing your probabilistic thinking is going to help you make more logical decisions, and to not feel so emotional and so worried and anxious all the time with your trades, but to actually make the right decision for your system. So let's move on to number 11. Experience solves many issues. So a lot of the things that you're going through, if you're learning, you won't have that anymore if you're still trading 10 years down the line. So I started learning, as I said, back in around 2002, when I first came across the game City Trader and got obsessed with the markets, and it's a rubbish game. I always mention it, but it's what got me hooked. And over this many years now, I have opened thousands and thousands of trades, okay? And so there's lots of experience that comes from that. Some experience that of panicky situations I've been through that now I know how to deal with them. Good situations, how to manage, manage many different things. But basically, the way that you get more mentally tough, it's the same as most other things, that it's a cycle that involves stress, recovery. Now, too much stress is bad, but a good amount of stress, like something that's not going to put you in a bloody mental hospital, is good. And then you recover from it, and then you can deal with more stress, and it's basically like a progressive overload kind of thing. So over time, experience is going to help you achieve that. Experience is also going to give you implicit knowledge. So this is like a implicit sort of statistical understanding of situations rather than explicit rules and stuff, like being able to spot things in situations that other people aren't able to spot, and many other things. There's a whole list of like what the difference is between experts and beginners. Who is it that wrote it? Was it Gary Klein maybe that put together that list? I'm not sure. But anyway, there's a whole list of things that's developed through time, that's developed through experience. But there's also something else that comes from experience. Like all of these things will solve most trading psychology issues because there's nothing really that throws you off by that point. You've experienced it before and realized like the reality of situations. But there's something else, and it's quantity of trades. When you've opened thousands and thousands of trades, as I have over the years, you stop feeling the scarcity and urgency. Have you noticed that my handwriting is getting worse and worse as we're going through this because I'm writing quicker? You stop feeling this. Why? Because when you miss an opportunity, you don't feel like, oh shit, I missed that one, like as if it's like the scarcity thing is like when you miss a trade, it's almost like one of a limited amount is gone. Like imagine there was only ever going to be 5 trades and you miss one. Oh shit, there's only 4 more left. That's the scarcity mindset. When you've opened thousands of trades, you know the next one's just around the corner. Likewise, the urgency that you don't feel in a trading session if nothing was appropriate for entering a trade and so you don't open a trade. You don't feel like towards the end of the session, oh shit, I better open something. I'm a trader, I'm meant to be trading. Because you know, they'll come. I've had thousands of trades. They'll come. It's fine. Or when you lose a trade, because losing is part of it. Like if I enter a trade that's like a 3-to-1, well, it should be that way around. 3-to-1, risking 1 to make 3. That means even the base rate probability is going to be 25% and 75%. Even if I've got an edge doesn't completely reverse that. It's still going to be, I've got more chance of losing the trade than profiting from it. But over time, it's going to succeed. Like it's going to lead to a positive trader's equation. So I'm opening that trade knowing there's a good chance that I'm going to lose. So when I do lose a trade like that, I'm not now thinking, oh, this is a big setback. All that time that I wasted waiting for that trade, I've now got to claw back like that bit of drawdown, or like I was up 10% this month and now I'm only up 8%. How can I get that back so I can withdraw some money from the account and whatever? You don't feel that anymore because you know that each trade is just like an individual snowflake. An individual snowflake, I'm not talking about the snowflakes that are going to complain in the comments about this being a 10 million hour video. Each individual snowflake on its own is insignificant, but an accumulation of many of them can be an avalanche or can be a snowman, something important like that. And that's the same with trading. You start to have the perspective. See, experience leads to perspective. There we go. But the thing is, that's like I saying that to you now. Let's say you just started trading a couple of months ago. So what? Okay, great. So some of my trading psychology issues are going to be fixed 10 years from now, 20 years from now. Brilliant. That's really helpful right now. Now, there are some aspects of the experience that you cannot get any other way than the passing of time. But there are some that you can get quicker, some aspects of experience. And one of them is this, quantity of trades. Get yourself into a trading simulator. Yes, it's not real money. A lot of people complain about that, but trust me, it's the most important thing to use a trading simulator the right way. And again, there's going to be a video either linked up here or in the description for our ultimate guide to a trading simulator. It's a long video explaining how to use it and the different ways that it can help your trading. And down there as well, you'll find a code for getting a discount from my recommended trading simulator if you want to get yourself one. Go in a trading simulator, dedicate time to just going through and getting trade after trade after trade to give yourself that perspective. You are also going to gain implicit knowledge, but you're going to get that perspective from having a quantity of trades. When you've opened thousands of trades, and be realistic with the amount of time as well. Like let's say pick euro dollar and go over the course of 1 year and open all the trades in that year. You're going to gain perspective and be like, okay, if I miss a trade, it's not the end of the world because I'm not going to get 1 trade per year. Like there are many trades here, just stay focused. If I keep missing trades, okay, fix that issue, but don't panic, don't revenge trade, or get FOMO because you missed the last trade and now you don't want to miss the next one, so you're jumping in too early or whatever. Like it gives you perspective that you just trade your system, because then after 1,000 trades, I've traded my system, I've traded how I'm meant to be trading, and my data is amazing, my returns are amazing. Why would I do anything that deviates from that? just be like a robot and just trade exactly how you're meant to be trading. And I'm saying trade like a robot as in be repetitive, not as in don't have any emotions, because as we know, emotions are an advantage. So gain that experience. It's also like this stops other sort of cognitive biases and things like that. There's one in particular that I see a lot of time with traders. It's called the break-even effect. It was discovered by Richard Thaler and another person that wrote the paper with him. The break-even effect is basically when you're in a drawdown, you're more willing to take big risks if it gives you the opportunity to get back to break even. And this is especially what people do on funding accounts. But what happens is that it's a matter of time before that goes wrong and the hole gets bigger. But again, when you have a higher quantity of trades that you've taken, when you are thinking in terms of probabilities and relying on probabilities like the last point, it's going to stop you falling into those traps, because you know that what's expected from your system, and the best way to get out of the situation is not to take big risks, not to gamble, not to YOLO the account, but to stick with the plan. Okay, so the next one is gradually adjust to new levels of capital. So I mentioned towards the start of the video that my most difficult time from a mental point of view was actually after I went full-time with my trading. This is after I'd made £500,000 in profit. I was managing capital for other people. We were setting up an investment fund. I was a professional trader, but I found it very difficult to adjust to new amounts of capital. Now, I've seen this with so many traders over the years. I can count on one hand the number of traders who have told me that they don't experience this. But you see, when you first start trading with real money, and this, like when people say that you should learn with real money, and I've said earlier that I don't think it's right, I think that comes later in the development process. But the whole reason is that when you have real money on the line, it changes your decision-making process. You get the fight or flight response a lot more, and things become like survival a bit more. And you kind of overcome that at the start of your career. Like when you first get used to like trading with real money, you won't experience that so much anymore. But then there'll be certain like milestones that you hit where it comes back. Certain amounts of money where you're risking the same percentage of your account, the process is the same, but for whatever reason, the actual monetary amount there changes your mindset, and it takes a while to overcome it. So for some people, it might be when the amount they profit or lose on each trade is the same amount that they were earning from a month in their job, or the same amount as a car or a house or whatever it might be. Like it's an amount of money that affects you emotionally in some way. So when you hit those sort of milestones, it can feel a bit like a plateau, and it's like you start making the wrong decisions, you start panicking, and you can very quickly spiral into a negative situation. So instead, the best thing you can do is to gradually get yourself to those amounts of money. If you realize that things are changing for you when you're hitting a certain amount of money, it doesn't matter if it's the same percentage at risk as what you were risking before, you should lower it. So if you remember earlier on, I was talking about these parameters that you might have. Let's say that your upper limit was always 1.5% and your lower limit was 0.5%, right? And let's say that this amount, it was fine when this was £1,000. And as soon as this starts to become £5,000, let's say, then you're going into psychological meltdown. So in that case, what you need to do is reduce the parameters so that this halfway point is maybe like 4,000 or 3,000, whatever amount is comfortable for you, and then slowly increase it over time. And the way that you can do this is similar to graded exposure, which is a therapy technique. And essentially what you're going to do, there's a few steps to this process, but I'm going to give you like the high level view of it. There are two things you need. You need a relaxation technique, and you need a way of tracking how you're responding to the situation. So you're going to start off, let's say your tracking technique is like a heart rate monitor. And relaxation techniques could be meditation, breathing, focusing on your breathing, that kind of thing. So you're going to start off with an amount of money where your heart rate doesn't change when you're making a decision. So you're opening a trade, your heart rate doesn't change. Let's say that amount for you is like when there's only £1,000 at risk, okay? Then you're going to gradually increase it. And let's say you increase it to 1,200, your heart rate goes up a bit, but you stay at that level until your heart rate goes back to normal. And you gradually increase it a bit more and a bit more. It's kind of like graded exposure. There are a few therapy types that are sort of in that whole category that this relates to those. And each time you get to a point where your heart rate's going up loads, you take a step back. And you're basically just doing little bits, to get yourself comfortable, and you only increase your capital at the point where your heart rate is in the region where you're going to be making logical decisions. Or it's not that your heart rate is leading to those decisions, it's just a symptom of being in a heightened emotional state. So that's one thing, is to gradually increase your amount of money. And this is especially true for funded accounts. A lot of people go for funded accounts because the most money they have in the world is the amount they pay for the fee for the funded account, which means that when they suddenly have like 200 grand available to them, it's like something they're not used to, and they don't realize that their emotions go spiraling and they lose the account quicker than it took them to get the account in the first place. So with funded accounts, this is really important. You could just gradually sort of introduce bits of a bit more capital as you go along. But the other thing that relates to all of this also relates to the funded account, which is the contrast effect. When you have big increases or decreases in capital, it creates this contrast effect that can really mess with your decision making. And the most important one for this is, if you get used to, with a funded account, let's say that you have a funded account that's 200k, and each time you open a trade, you're risking 1% of it, so you're risking 2k. And you feel comfortable with that. Then something happens, the funding company goes under, you lose the account, whatever, and you're back to your own capital that you've saved up over time, and it's 10k. Like, the contrast effect, it can lead to you taking big risks on this. Maybe it's not 2k, maybe it's like a bit less than that or whatever, but you end up taking positions that you shouldn't be taking. And vice versa, it can be the opposite, where you're taking really small positions on the bigger account and so on. But basically, you just want to gradually adjust to the different levels of capital. And between each phase of the funded account, so if it's like a 2-stage thing where you've got to do the challenge, then the whatever the thing is after, the validation, I don't know what they call it these days, I can't remember, but after the first stage, take a break. Then when you're completely back to normal, go for the second stage. And especially if you do get funded, before you go and trade on the main account, take a big break so that you reset, because in most cases, the way that you're trading to get the account in the first place is not going to be the same as how you want to trade to make things sustainable over the long term. Or at least it shouldn't be, because the best way to pass the funding accounts is actually to use an approach that isn't sustainable over the long term. And that's not something we'll discuss in this video. But just make sure you gradually adjust, because when I had my meltdown, it was because I was then trading bigger amounts of money. The more responsibility I felt for that meant that I wasn't sleeping as much. It meant that I had more stress all the time, like chronic stress, 24/7 I was feeling stressed. When I opened a trade, just from seeing the amount that I had at risk, it was like eating me up inside, and I ended up getting very ill. And I spoke about it in a video which I'll link up here and in the description box, which I actually referred to earlier as well. Okay, the camera just cut off and I don't know where it did, so hopefully I've covered everything that's here, but if I haven't, then you can ask me about what's written here and I'll explain it. But the next one is to do your inner work outside of your trading career. Now this one, it becomes really obvious when you've worked with so many different traders. You see, the benefit of my position is that I have gained a lot of experience from trading for myself. So over 20 years, I've been obsessed with the markets. So that's more than what you'll find for most traders online in the first place. Then I've worked with a lot of really experienced, really intelligent people, both traders and other sort of functions from financial services and risk and things like that, that I've been able to learn from them or get advice from them. Then I've also helped hundreds, if not thousands of traders around the world at different stages in their career, which means that there are certain patterns that I can pick up on that you wouldn't gain if you only had one perspective. If I was saying everything just from my perspective, well, you might be completely different to me. But there are certain principles or certain patterns that emerge that happen for everyone that are like really common. And the only way you'd know that is by interacting with so many different traders. And one of those things is about things affecting your psychology that are not related to your trading. And most people in that situation not realizing that that's the case. So you can have traders who are extremely talented, maybe making positive returns or have the skill set that they should be able to, and they're holding themselves back in some way. And it's because of things that are unrelated to their trading. And it's things related to, I've got a bit of a lag going on here. I'm not surprised the lag's happening in my brain at this point as well. It'll be things to do with past experiences, upbringing, culture. Yeah, there's a lag, so my writing's going to get even worse. The people around them, so let's say influence. And all of this is going to affect their self-esteem, their identity or self-image, what they feel comfortable with, and that relates to success and failure as well, expectations, so on and so on, like having an example of someone succeeding and so on. And this comes out in the markets in so many different ways. There's a lot of transference that happens where people put their past experiences on the markets. I think Denise Scholl talks about this a lot, where it's like the market's like a parent or something. Or there's a guy on my team, Macaulay, who is wanting to do research into attachment theory and how that relates to trading and parenting styles. So reparenting and things like that. So we'll maybe discuss some of that in the future video once he's gone into the research of that. But basically there's so much baggage that we have that affects us, that can make you feel like you're never going to make it, that no matter how successful you are, you can always convince yourself that you're a failure. When you open a trade, you can always have the assumption that it's going to lose and be pessimistic about it, and it changes the way you make decisions with that trade. It will change the way that you do your trade management. It will change the way that you actually find opportunities in the first place, because if you are pessimistic, you'll find reasons to explain why you shouldn't take a trade, even in situations where you should. So it's like pessimism. And it's kind of heartbreaking to watch, because you see people who are really talented, like really intelligent, and there are people who don't have the skill that they have, who are sort of surpassing them. And you can see that actually the thing that's affecting them is not from their trading, it's from other things in their life. And so you need to do the inner work outside your trading. And unfortunately, this takes time and effort, and it means journaling, not just for your trades and your trading session, but also just general life, if you think that's going to help you. And a big one is like therapy. I know there's a lot of people that say therapy is like a waste of money, a waste of time, because there's this whole sort of red pill shit that changed the way people feel about it. But I've been doing therapy now for coming on to, what is it, like 2.5 years, I think it is, every Friday. It's been very helpful for me. It's not sitting there talking about how you're feeling. It's just processing information and understanding yourself more and realizing, okay, this has led to this, that's led to this, that's why I process things in this way now, but I can see now it's because of this, or it's irrational and I can reframe it, or, you know, there's all kinds of things. Or it's about just making better decisions because you've got someone else that's a sounding board that understands you. But you need to do that inner work. You need to understand what's really going on in your brain. Why are you the way that you are? And how is that being reflected in your trading? How is that being reflected in the way that you are in the markets? Because it's so funny. You get like, in many different aspects of trading, it's like you have this sort of spectrum, and there'll be people over here and people in the middle. And you think, why are they there or there? It looks like I've drawn a frog now. Weird frog there. There we go, give him some ears as well. Now he's like a weird bear. But jeez, you start thinking, why is this person here and this person is here? Well, it's not because of the training they've gone through, because they're both learning at Duomo. So it's about past experiences, it's about personality, it's about risk profile, and all kinds of things. So there are some things that you need to work on outside your trading, and it's worth it. It's really worth it. It's, as men, it can feel like soft to go and do it, or like you don't want to be vulnerable and think about things from your past. You want to be stoic and think ever forward and so on. But if it's going to help your performance in some way, then why the fuck not? Just go for it. That's what I thought, and that's what I did, and it's benefited me in so many ways. I'm such a better trader now than I was even like 13 years ago when I went full-time for the first time and was making amazing money then. I'm like light years ahead of where I was then. And it's because of things like that, and from being more logical and doing the research, and yeah, things that I'm talking to you about. So the next thing, which relates to that, also relates to conditioned responses and so many other things, and we'll go through this very quickly, is that you need to track irrational behavior and thoughts. Track the automatic responses that you have to things that you think are unhelpful. You know, not where you've gone through a thought process and you've said, okay, I think the trade's doing this, therefore I'm going to take, so I think the price is doing this, therefore I'm going to take this action with my trade, but more like, what were the things that you did without thinking about it that in hindsight you think that was a bit irrational, I shouldn't have done that? You need to take note of them. And the best way to do that, I've found, I think it's like the closest thing to collecting data on your emotions and thought processes, is to use what we call the ABCDE sequence. C, D, E sequence. And you could do this in your trading journal. So A is the activating event. Okay, so what was it in the markets that triggered this particular thought process? Maybe it was the price approaching your stop loss, for example. So, or maybe it was like suddenly volatility kicked in and the price was moving really fast. So B, what were the beliefs or thoughts? So thoughts that were triggered as a result of that activating event. So when price is moving really fast, what did you start thinking? Oh, I can maybe make some profit here, or whatever it might be. Or when the price hit your stop loss and you were really down, you felt like this is meaning that you're a failure. You're attaching your self-worth to your trades. C as consequences. What happened next? Because the price is moving really fast and I believe this is a chance to make profit, I jumped into a trade when I shouldn't have. Okay. Then we have, or maybe it's like the price in my stop loss, I felt like a failure, and as a result, then I stopped trading for 2 weeks, or I went out for beers and went on a negative spiral, went on a bender. The next one is disputation. So you need to argue against this. You need to give the opposite. Like, well, imagine that someone else is saying that negative thing to you, or the inappropriate belief or thought. You need to give the other side of it. You know, a lot of the time, like when we go through the inner talk stuff, which you'll find it linked below and at the end of this video, a lot of that inner talk that we, like the negative inner talk that we give ourselves, if it was someone else saying that to us, we wouldn't stand for it. We wouldn't listen to them. We'd argue back and defend ourselves. And so it's that kind of thing. And then E is efforts for change. For a change. So what can you do in future to avoid this based on this disputation? Okay. And if you collect these up in a spreadsheet each time, you just like note these things down, you can start to find where there are recurring triggers, like activating events, where there are recurring beliefs that are associated with different activated events, where there's recurring consequences, because we often deal with situations in a similar way. And actually, when things get very emotional, we can revert back to our previous times of dealing with things, which is why you often find grown adults that act like babies when they don't get their own way. Like the Karens in the comments that are complaining that I'm going on for ages. Enjoy. But you're basically collecting data, and what this means is that you can figure out where there are maybe conditioned responses that need to be worked on, or you can use cognitive therapy to get through that, to overcome it. And we'll talk about that in the final step, where there are maybe flaws that could be fixed through your system, things like rules that you could put in place to mitigate things. Now, my rule is that I don't like to set a rule to mitigate something if I haven't tried to identify the root cause and solve that first. As I said earlier, lots of trading psychology problems, most of them are just symptoms and not the root cause. And if you find the root cause, you can solve that and the trading psychology issue just disappears. So you don't necessarily want to have rules. That's how you become like restricted by all these different things you need to do. You don't want to always add things. Sometimes it's about removing things or changing things. So collecting all of this is the best way. It's the closest thing we get to data on this sort of stuff. The other thing you can do is track your heart rate during trading sessions, but I didn't put that in this video. I didn't want to discuss it too much apart from when we're talking about graded exposure, because I want these to be the 15 principles that I think by sticking to it, you're definitely going to get yourself on the right track, rather than just like the nice to have things that are for anyone that's a bit extra, which I am extra. So I would do the heart rate monitor if I was you. But we could discuss that another time. So then we get on to the final one, which is overcome automatic behaviors by identifying outliers. So this is taken from cognitive therapy. When we find these things that we keep doing that we don't want to be doing, let's say that you keep moving your stop loss and it leads to you getting this big hole in your like huge drawdown that you didn't want to have. Well, obviously no one wants a drawdown, but you let something spiral out of control. Your immediate thing is like, think about what rules can I put in place? What can I do that's going to stop me doing that? You're looking online for the quick fixes, and then you come across all the trading psychology videos that are rubbish, that give you solutions that don't even work, that are just passed on from one generation to another of traders that date back a century ago and have no relation to science. Just going ranting again. But you're looking for a way to stop that irrational automatic behavior. But in many cases, when you look at cognitive therapy, you don't want to look at how you stop that behavior. Instead, you want to replace it with something else. So what you need to do, and this is also why you need to start using a trading journal so you can track it, but also, that was right, journal, also the ABCD that we just went through, that's going to help you track these as well, because you're going to see, okay, there's a theme here, these things. So what you want to do is not look for the situations where you went through the automatic behavior, but look for the times where you had the same trigger, the same stimulus that usually triggers, so the same activating event, but then you didn't go through with that pattern of behavior. You didn't take the action that's usually a disaster. So price was approaching your stop loss and you left your stop loss and let it get hit. So you find those occasions, the exceptions, the outliers. So you're going to find the exceptions, and you're going to describe them in detail. You're going to relive them in detail. And by doing so, you're going to identify alternative positive actions. Positive actions. Actions, there we go. You can't tell what it says. It looks like it says fruit, but identify alternative positive actions. So now when you're in that situation, it's almost like you're getting the stimulus, but by going over and over the positive behavior pattern instead, you're finding something that's been proven in the past that this can happen, and you're just shifting your behavior response to something that's more productive. So what was it that you did that time that you left your stop loss there? What were you thinking? What were you doing? Did you step away from the screen? Did you sit on your hands? What were you doing? Now you know in future, okay, from now on, I'm going to do X, Y, Z, and that's going to avoid me taking that behavior. So you haven't stopped, like you haven't fought against that behavior in a way of like, okay, I'm going to be consciously aware each time I'm doing this thing, and I'm just going to not do it. You've found a different behavior response that you're going to try and make the habit in that situation that will avoid that thing happening. And just related to that is that if you've gone through the other 14 points, and from your ABCDE journal, you've figured out that there are things that are like deeply embedded, perhaps conditioned responses that you caused when you were learning to trade and risking too much money and making all those mistakes, then there are cognitive behavioral techniques, let's say cognitive therapy, such as graded exposure that we talked about earlier is a good one. And there are others as well. And we talk about these in the Duomo Trader Development Program, as well as many other things. So look, I know this has been a very, very long video. I didn't want to script it because a lot of the time I feel like when I script things, then although I'm going through the research and it's more succinct, it feels a bit distant between my experiences and what I'm telling you. It comes across like I'm just teaching a lesson rather than telling you this is from over 20 years experience. You should listen to this. So I know that some of you would have hated that this has gone on so long. Most people probably dropped off after about the first 10 minutes or something or less. So if you got to the end, thank you. I want to encourage you to go in the description box, find those links for the free downloads, the free resources, the free training. Honestly, we put so much effort and thought into this. It's not just something we throw together to think, how do we get people to sign up? We think through the whole process that someone goes through. So sign up, make use of all of that. You don't have to join the program, although I definitely recommend it. And if you are convinced that you don't want to learn our approach, but you just want the trading psychology stuff, send us an email, contact duomo@duomoinitiative.com. Let us know and we can try and get you hooked up with that. It was a package that we used to offer a while ago and we don't offer it anymore, but for the sake of this video, we can offer it again. If you liked the video, leave a comment below. Let me know which points were particularly helpful for you. Please take them all on board. Please try with them, because honestly, it will get you really close to being free of most of the issues that you're experiencing with the psychological side. Hit the thumbs up button if you liked this and if you want more videos like this. And on screen, you're going to see two videos that we'll link here. One is the one about emotions that I refer to a lot. It's really detailed. It goes through the research. I really recommend just committing and watching that. And the other one is the self-talk toolkit, because even though we haven't talked about negative self-talk that much, I think a lot of the things that are in there, like creating rituals and how you, like the mental chatter, how you approach that, journaling and all this kind of stuff, will be really helpful for your trading psychology in general. So check those out, and thanks for watching. I'll see you soon.